Welcome back to Northern Tales, where silence is broken and every woman's story finds its way back to her own voice. Tonight, we return to our story, What We Trade in Silence. Before we begin, remember Zuwaira, a young student far from home, carrying dreams heavier than her pockets. She came to the city with hope, but hunger, loneliness, and hardship soon became her daily companions. Then her roommate, Khadija, came with an offer that sounded like rescue. One egg donation, one secret, just one payment that could change everything. What began as survival became a habit. And with every choice, Zuwaira drifted further from the girl she used to be. Until one day she decided to stop. But just when she thought the past was over, she saw a child with her family's face. Let's continue. After seeing the child in the mall, Zuwaira was no longer living in the present. She moved through her days like someone haunted. Worry sat beside her from morning till night. What if that child was truly connected to her? What if someone in the world, a part of her, was growing up without ever knowing she existed? What if one careless decision had created a bond she had no right to claim? Then came the guilt. Not the old guilt of breaking her values. This was different, deeper, more confusing. She felt guilty for wanting to know. She knew she signed away her rights as a mother the moment she signed those papers. She felt guilty for imagining the child could be hers. Guilty for feeling jealous of the woman who held her. Guilty for grieving something she had willingly surrendered. And then there was fear. Fear that she was losing control of her mind. Fear that she will become obsessed. Fear that she will never feel normal again. At night, she replayed every detail of that afternoon. The child's cry, the shape of her cheeks, the familiar eyes, the stubborn little mouth. Sometimes she argued with herself. It has to be a coincidence. Children resemble many people. You are being foolish. But another voice answered just as quickly. Then why can't you forget her? After weeks of torment, Zuwaira made a decision. If the family visited the playground once, they could visit again. The mall had a children's playground on the ground floor, a bright place full of balloons, plastic slides, laughter, and parents trying to keep up with restless toddlers. She remembered passing it many times. It was the kind of place families returned to on weekends. So she began to go there, at first only on Saturdays, then Saturdays and Sundays, then almost every day. She could find an excuse. She would sit with a bottle of water or a cheap snack and watch the entrance. Every family that arrived made her heart race. Every little girl in hijab made her sit up straighter. Every cry made her turn. But it was never them. Over 1 week passed, 2 weeks, then 4, then 6, still nothing. With every visit, hope thinned out, and yet she kept going because stopping would mean accepting that she might never know. Eventually, exhaustion did what reason could not. One evening, she sat alone on a bench near the empty playground as cleaners swept the floor and shops began to close. Children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel what had been growing inside her. She was mourning, not a child she had raised, not a family she had known, not even certainty. She was mourning possibility, the possibility of answers, the possibility of connection, the possibility of undoing regret. She was mourning the version of herself who still believed some losses could be repaired if you searched hard enough. Tears came quietly. the tired tears of someone grieving something she could not explain to anyone. And there was another truth she could no longer ignore. The visits were costing money: transport fare, snacks, meals she bought while waiting, little purchases made to justify staying longer. One by one, the expenses chipped away at her savings. What she had carefully planned for her final year costs and emergencies began to shrink again. She checked her account one night and felt cold. So much spent for nothing she could prove. That was when reality hardened inside her. She would not find the family again. Maybe they had traveled. Maybe they lived in another city. Maybe they had only visited once. Maybe the child had never been connected to her at all. Whatever the truth was, it was beyond her reach. And with that acceptance came a decision she hated even as she made it. Against all her feelings, against the guilt, against the exhaustion, against everything she had promised herself, she would donate once more. Just once, she said, to replace what she had lost, to steady herself, to finish school without fear. Somewhere inside, a voice whispered that she was walking backward into the very life she had tried to live. But another voice, colder and louder, replied, "Some needs do not wait for healing." Zuwaira went back to the clinic. By now, everything felt painfully familiar: the reception desk, the polite smiles, the forms she barely read anymore, the waiting room with women pretending not to study one another, the quiet language of people bound by secrets. Nothing about it shocked her now. That frightened her more than anything. She took the injections as instructed. She returned for her scans. The technician measuring follicles in silence. The same words she has heard before. Good response. Come back tomorrow. Almost ready. And just like that, it was time for egg collection again. On the morning of the procedure, she felt strangely detached. No panic, only tiredness. She changed into the hospital gown, lay on the narrow bed, and stared at the ceiling while nurses moved around her. She was sedated. When she woke up, the room was blurry. Voices floated around her. The ceiling lights looked too bright. At first, there was only the usual discomfort, the dull ache low in her abdomen. She expected that much. But within minutes, the pain changed. It sharpened, a sudden stabbing sensation deep in her tummy that made her gasp. She shifted on the bed, hoping it would ease. Instead, it grew stronger. The dull ache became waves of piercing pain. Each movement hurt. Even breathing deeply felt dangerous. She called slightly, clutching her stomach. A nurse noticed immediately. Soon they will have for an urgent scan. She lay still while the probe moved across her abdomen. Then came the careful words. "There is some bleeding in your tummy." Not a lot, they said, but enough to monitor closely. She was admitted for observation. They gave her painkillers through the drip. Her blood pressure was checked again and again. Nurses came and went. The hours stretched strangely in that small room. At times the pain eased to a heavy soreness. Then it would return in sharp flashes that made her eyes water. For the first time since she had started donating, fear was no longer abstract. This was not a warning on paper, not a lecture, not something that happened to careless girls in stories. It was happening inside her own body. By evening, the pain slowly began to settle. By the next day, the stabbing episodes had reduced. She could sit up without crying. She could walk to the bathroom carefully. On the second day, the head doctor came to see her. He was older than the others, calm-faced, with the tired eyes of someone who had spent years watching people make expensive mistakes. He sat beside her bed and opened her file. Then he began to ask questions. How many times had she donated? Which clinics had she used? How often? What drugs had she taken before? Had she ever had complications? Had she been truthful in previous consultations? Zuwaira answered with the lie she had prepared. This is my third time. The room went quiet. He looked at her for a moment longer than was comfortable. Not angry, not surprised, just unconvinced. She knew he did not believe her. This was already her second time in that same hospital alone. Still, he wrote something in the file and continued. Then his tone changed, less administrative, more human. He explained that repeated ovarian stimulation was not without risk, that frequent procedures could affect the body in ways not fully predictable, that some complications were immediate, like bleeding or even infection. Others were long-term concerns, still debated, but serious enough to be taken seriously. He mentioned the fear of cancer with repeated stimulation, not as certainty, as a risk, as something no one wise should dismiss. Zuwaira listened in silence. She had had warnings before, from nurses, from the forms she signed, from Khadija in passing. But warnings had always belonged to the future, to other people, to unlucky women whose name she would never know. She had never imagined herself lying in a hospital bed, waiting for internal bleeding to stop. The doctor closed the file gently. You are young, he said. Do not spend your health as if it can always be bought back. After he left, she stared at the ceiling for a long time. 2 days later, she was discharged. She walked out slowly, carrying her bag in one hand and a pain prescription in the other. The same doors opened, the same corridor stretched ahead, the same city waited for her outside. But nothing felt as familiar as it had when she entered. After Zuwaira returned to the hostel, she expected each day to feel better. Instead, something remained wrong. Not dramatic enough to alarm anyone, not severe enough to send her running back to hospital. Just a constant sense that her body was no longer fully at ease. There was discomfort low in her abdomen, a heaviness. There was bloating that made her clothes sit differently around her waist. Sometimes a dull dragging sensation when she stood too long. Sometimes pain when she turned in bed. She ignored it. She told herself the body needed time to heal. The stress was making her overthink. But the feeling stayed. For 2 weeks, she moved through classes carrying discomfort like an unseen bag. She smiled when spoken to. She took notes, pretended normality. Then one afternoon, after their last lecture of the day, everything changed. Students were gathering books and chatting about assignments when a pain tore through her lower abdomen. The pain was sharp, violent, and sudden. It felt like a knife had been driven inside her. She gasped, bent forward, then collapsed to the floor, screaming. The classroom froze. Someone shouted for help. Another girl knelt beside her books scattered across the tiles. The pain came in painful waves. She could not straighten her body. She could not think. She could not answer properly when they asked what was wrong. They rushed her to the school clinic. By then, she was pale, sweating, and trembling. They performed an urgent scan. The room became tense almost immediately. There was a huge amount of free fluid in her abdomen. The clinician explained she likely had internal bleeding. They began arranging for referral to the government general hospital. But through pain and panic, Zuwaira refused. No, she said, take me to my doctor. Even half conscious, she knew where she wanted to go. Not because she trusted them completely, but because they already knew parts of the story no one else did. The school ambulance took her straight to the fertility clinic. This time there was no waiting. She was assessed immediately. Blood tests were taken, consents were signed in haste, and the theater was prepared. When she opened her eyes again, daylight was filtering through the curtains. Her throat was dry. Her abdomen felt heavy and sore. There was a bandage below her navel. Then she turned her head. Her mother was there, eyes swollen from crying, prayer beads wrapped tightly in one hand. Beside her stood her father, older than she remembered, worry carved into every line of his face. For a moment, shame struck harder than pain. The school had called them. Her mother reached for her hand and wept gently. Her father kept asking if she could hear him. Later that morning, the doctor came in on rounds, the same doctor who had warned her before. Her father stood immediately. Doctor, what happened to my daughter? What caused this? Is she going to be all right? The doctor glanced briefly at Zuwaira before answering. She understood the look. He knew what the truth was, but he did not expose her. He spoke carefully. She had ruptured ovarian cyst, which can occasionally happen in young women. There was internal bleeding. We operated in time. She is stable now. Her father kept asking questions. Will it happen again? Will it affect her marriage? Would she have children? Was it dangerous? The doctor answered only what was necessary. He reassured where he could, avoided where he chose. But his eyes returned to Zuwaira more than once, not accusing, but not gentle either, only knowing. Over the next 48 hours, she remained admitted. He learned fragments of what had happened. During surgery, they found significant blood and clots inside her abdominal cavity. One enlarged ovarian cyst had ruptured and was actively bleeding. There were dense adhesion bands of scars, causing structures in her pelvis to stick where they should be moving freely. Her ovary, once healthy and whole, now carried the marks of everything she had put her body through. Repeated procedures, repeated pain, leaving behind damage that could not be ignored. The surgeons were able to preserve both ovaries, but they had concern about future pelvic pain and fertility if further damage occurred. On the third day, the elderly doctor came to see her again. We need to talk about what your body has gone through. She lay back quietly, staring at her hands. Your ovaries are still there, but that is good. You may still conceive in the future. He paused. Egg donation can affect how the ovaries release eggs, how they respond later in life, and even how easily pregnancy happens. He explained that some women in such conceive naturally, while others may struggle and take longer or need treatment. Scar tissue in the pelvis could also increase pain, interfere with normal movement of the tubes and ovaries, and then raise the risk of future fertility problems. Then his tone hardened. Young women come here thinking the body is a machine that resets after every pain. He turned to face her directly. It does not. You were warned more than once, yet you kept returning. You treated your reproductive health like something cheap and replaceable. Zoera lowered her eyes, tears gathering silently. The doctor sighed, less angry now, more tired than before. What is done is done. But if you are wise, this ends here. Protect what you still have. 4 days later, after the surgery, Zoela was still in the hospital. Her parents had gone. She remained in a 4-bed room in the hospital, yet had occupied the other beds. The room had been strangely quiet. One afternoon, another patient was brought in, a woman in her late 40s, neatly dressed, despite obvious discomfort. She was helped carefully onto the bed opposite hers. Zoera barely looked up. Her mind was elsewhere. The doctor's words kept circling like a curse she could not silence. There is scarring. You may still conceive, but there may be difficulty. Protect what you still have. Again and again, the sentences returned. She had no space inside her left for anyone else's story. As evening approached, the room changed. Voices entered before people did. Soft greetings, the smell of food brought from home. Visitors had come for the new patient. Two young women entered first, carrying bags and speaking gently. Then a man followed, well dressed, composed, the careful concern of a husband on his face. Zuwaira turned only slightly, more from habit than interest. Then she froze. Behind them came another figure, a young girl in hijab, the nanny, the same nanny from the mall restaurant. Her breath caught in her throat. And then in the nanny's arm was the child she had seen almost 3 months ago. The same round cheeks, the same eyes, the same stubborn little mouth. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. The voices became distant. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. They were here, not in a dream, not in memory, not in some cruel coincidence, passing through a shopping mall. Here, in the bed opposite hers, Zuwaira could not stop staring at the child. She tried to look away, tried to appear uninterested, but her eyes kept returning to the little girl, as if pulled by something stronger than will. No one noticed. The family moved naturally around the room, their attention fixed on the woman in the bed opposite. Her husband asked after her comfort. The two young women arranged bags and fluffed pillows. The nanny kept the child occupied with toys and biscuits. The little girl laughed once, a bright, stubborn laugh, and Zuwaira felt it like a wound. They stayed for about an hour. Then one by one they began to leave. They said their goodbyes with promises to return. The husband lingered longest, adjusting the woman's blanket before walking out. The nanny carried the child behind him. And just like that, they were gone again. Silence returned to the room. The woman turned to Zuwaira with unexpected friendliness. There is food there if you want some. She pointed to the flask and covered tray her family had brought. Zuwaira shook her head. No, thank you. Only now did she study the woman properly. She did not look like someone seriously ill. There was no visible weakness, no grimacing pain, no anxious restlessness common in sick patients. In fact, as soon as her family left, the woman sat up comfortably, opened the flask, and began eating chicken pepper soup with appetite so strong it looked celebratory. Zuwaira said nothing. Later that evening, a nurse entered carrying a file. She spoke quietly to the woman. The transfer will be done in the morning. Zuwaira's attention sharpened immediately. Though she kept her face neutral, the woman nodded. After the nurse left, the phone calls began, one after another. The woman answered each call in hushed tones, turning slightly towards the wall. Her voice dropped so low that Zuwaira could only hear sound but not meaning. Fragments of concern, small laughter, long pauses, but no clear words. That night, Zuwaira barely slept. She lay awake, replaying everything she had seen: the nanny, the child, the husband, the woman, the same family, the same child. What were they doing here? Why was the woman admitted? And what did they mean by transfer? Every answer seemed just beyond reach. Join us for the conclusion of the story next week. Don't forget to like, share, and